Hello, Cyrus is Peter from Sirus Gaming Spot, and welcome to Sirus Gaming Corner, a gaming podcast where I and Sorceress 1390 talk about various gaming topics. From old games to new games, everything is fair game. So, how's your evening going so far, Sword?
Good, going good. Good to be back on after a little hiatus.
So, for today's episode, we're going to talk about something much more generalized in gaming. And that is, well, two things, but they're kind of interlinked. And that is difficulty and video game fail states. So this is a much more general sense. It applies to pretty much everything that is a video game, I think.
Yeah, this is probably the most, I guess you could say general episode that we might have done, honestly, now I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. So I think we should get out of what counts as a video game fail state, you think? Because it's not like you die and then that's just a fail state, because there are some games where you die, but that's part of the way you progress through the game, sort of.
Yeah, have you played any of the Quantic Dream games, like
No.
Detroit Become Human?
Oh no.
All right, well, basically it's kind of like that's a kind of a thing where in some of those games, you'll have different characters that you play as, and if one of them dies due to a choice you made, or you maybe messed up a QTE or something, the game will continue. The story just keeps going no matter what. So that's kind of that's almost like part of the experience in a way.
Yeah.
It's one thing to try to keep them alive, but if you do something and then the story keeps going regardless, so I think that's kind of an example of that.
Yeah, I think talking about video game fail states is interesting, just because video game fail states in general is just a way to tell the player, I think, that you're doing something wrong, buddy. You're doing something wrong. And I think how games do fail states is an interesting way to test your knowledge and skill in learning the game mechanics generally. And there's so many interesting ways I think video games have done video game fail states, because the only Quantic Dream game that I played is Heavy Rain. I think the only true video game fail state in that game is getting a bad ending.
Yeah, that's the only way it can work.
Yeah. And there's the very traditional way where you die, you get a game over, and then you load to your most recent save state. It's how a lot of games have done it. Another way is it depends, because in Atelier there isn't really a way for you to die per se, but the way how your fail state is just you fight a boss, you couldn't beat the boss, and then it boots you back to your main base, and then you lose half the items you gather. But then you don't technically have a game over. But I think that is a fail state, just because every your progress on the boss is reset, so you have to fight the boss from scratch all over again.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that game goes about it. That's a good penalty. Yeah. Instead of just kicking you back and saying to reload your save.
Yeah, because reloading your save is just one extra step for a game like that, I think. And in past Atelier games, it probably would have been better just to reload, because in the Atelier game that had time limit, it would boot you back to your main base, as well as a time penalty, because you have to account the time that you go back to your main base after being destroyed by a boss. And that would probably messed up your time management schedule, so most people would probably just reload anyway.
And in a game where time is sensitive, that's that's key.
Yeah. And there are also I think Fire Emblem is incredibly interesting in that most people, Fire Emblem has this community wide driven fail state that most people abide by, and that is if you get a character killed, you reset. The game doesn't reinforce that. It's what the players do. And that's because like if you lose a character in Fire Emblem, you lose them forever, and like all the time you spent building up to them, all the resources you spent on the character themselves, it's totally gone. So that's I think that's incredibly interesting to see how like you don't technically get a fail state in Fire Emblem, but most players who play Fire Emblem will treat it as a fail state.
Yeah, I feel like that's the kind of game where like people might save scum a little bit, and then you lose a character, and then just reload your save.
Well, it's not really save scumming, because like most Fire Emblems make it that if you reset and the battle, you reset the entire battle. It's not like save points in the battlefield that you can save beforehand.
Right, or like in Three Houses where you can go back to previous turns, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or at least in terms like that's how most of the game works. Raid and Dawn actually does have battle saves, and that's pretty exploitable. But for most of the games, like if you want to restart, like if you want to redo a move, you have to either go on with the instance that you're at or reset the entire battle. But yeah, like I think like player driven fail state is interesting in that, like I said, it's not driven by the game, but also like what kind of mindset do you think fail states ultimately drive into the player, you think, when they get to one?
I mean, yeah, I think it's really circumstantial at the end of the day. Like with Fire Emblem, for example. I mean, when you got like the permadeath system, I feel like the mindset is kind of like well, is it worth?
I think like the mindset for me, like in terms of like getting a video game phase, like what do I do wrong? How can I improve upon this? What I did wrong, and then keep going at it until I get through it to it. I think that's like the general moveset that people have when they get to a video game fail state. At least that's the mindset that you're supposed to have, rather than just like crying about it like a baby.
It's like, wah, throw the controller at the TV. No.
I think video game fail states is a great way for people to learn what they're doing wrong and how to improve themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of like you get better by doing it kind of situation.
You get better by experiencing a battle for the first time, even if you know that you might probably going to lose it. And as well as learning, like failure does allow you to learn what you did wrong, so you can improve upon your skills better. It's just like real life, I guess. You learn a lot through failing stuff, as much as you do like just learning through it, just reading about it.
If it's like an RPG, like a turn-based game or something, then you could readjust your strategy, your party, skills, whatever the game in question, however it works. But yeah, basically that. Or like I think I was saying before, like using Fire Emblem as an example, like with the permadeath system, like I think another mindset is like, all right, well, I lost this character. Is it worth restarting the entire battle, or should I salvage what I do have and just keep going and accept the loss? You know what I mean? So I think that's another thing that makes that interesting in that series, something like that. Or Valkyria Chronicles. I think Valkyria Chronicles also have permadeath for the other party members.
There is permadeath in Valkyria Chronicles, but it's like extremely hard to get that, because like not only do your character need to be downed, they also have to have an enemy unit run over them, I think.
Yeah, so it's not so much as just like, oh, they lost all their HP and then that's it.
Yeah. But like I think the video game fail state does determine how you play that game. Just because like Fire Emblem is like very strict on how you lose a unit, that you play really safely in Fire Emblem, and like sometimes like that can otherwise get you to turtle in that game, which is a pretty boring strat to do. But then like I think like Fire Emblem has done a few good ways to try to avoid you from turtling, just because like Fire Emblem Conquest, like there are instances where if you do not kill like the enemy in your vicinity, you're just going to get overwhelmed. And like there's not like really much opportunity to turtle in that game because of how enemies units attack and are positioned. And like you don't even have that many defensive units too. Like that game, really encourages you to be able to use the duel system to be able to clean up house for the enemies around your allies in one turn, or you're gonna have a bad time. And like there are like instances in Valkyrie Chronicles where sometimes you do lose a unit, but you have instances of recovery. And like that plays well to Valkyrie Chronicles 4, where you have entire battle situation changes, and it like you think you might want a map, but then phase 2 opens up and you're in a bad situation. But you have like various options, ways to come back, and that's due to how you can recover from getting down in that game. And how that game's general fail state is much more lenient compared to Fire Emblem, which really just changes how you can play the game too.
Yeah, they do go for like two very different types of strategies and things to keep in mind for the fail state. So, and yeah, looking back on it, I do remember that being the case for Valkyrie Chronicles. I mean, it is still something to keep in mind. It's you know, but it's not nearly as strict as the Fire Emblem games are.
But yeah, but like video game fail states in general, just like it dictates how you play the game, I think. Because like ultimately, video game fail states are ultimately like a way developers tell you that the strategy you're using is not working, so you should probably rethink your current strat, or you just have to get more used to this boss's movesets and learn how to dodge accordingly. Stuff like that. Like that's like the most general way, because like most video game fail states are just if you die, you come back here.
Yeah, just like an instant. Yeah. Okay, here, try again.
Yeah, though I will say that video game fail states have become much more lenient throughout the years.
Yeah, even lately, like you die and then it kind of just like even if you die in like a random encounter in an RPG or something, it'll just kick you right back to right before the fight started. You know,
like it depends. Like Tales, I think have been pretty good in terms of video game fail states. Like Symphonia, Abyss, like is very, really demoralizing a bit sometimes, just because like you die, you go back to the last save point, and if you fight a boss, you basically just have to press X over and over again just to get back to the boss fight that you lost to.
Yeah, those non-skippable cutscenes kind of suck.
Vesper allows you to skip cutscenes, but you still can't like retry bosses. You can Graces and Onward, and then Graces and Onward, you were able to basically just skip cutscenes and then retry bosses, and allow you to mess around with the menu. And I think that is a fair way to do stuff, just because like most like Tales games usually put a safe spot before the boss fight anyway.
So yeah, it's kind of redundant to have to mash X and skip to the cutscene. So I think Graces gives you good leeway there.
Graces F and Onward does that, so I think that's a good quality of life change, because like boss fights in Tales games, like most of the time, doesn't really test you on how well you do throughout the entire dungeon. At least it does that through like you going from point A to the start to the end of the dungeon, but not like through the boss encounters, I think.
Yeah, bosses can tend to be like a test of attrition sometimes.
Like the boss difficulty and the dungeon difficulty, I think it's separate.
It's kind of it's like yeah, I guess attrition is the right word. Yeah, it's like a completely new obstacle, and rather than use everything you've learned up to this point, or that kind of thing.
It's sort of set up like sort of the same way Persona, I think, that like the dungeon difficulty and its challenges is separated from the boss difficulty, since the bosses can only usually be attacked at like. Well, for Persona 5, it's like that. Persona 3 and 4, no, you usually don't want to attack a boss right away when you discover it. You usually do want to like come back and go try it again, like on a new day, just so you have all your resources.
Yeah, that we could like restock.
And the game is set up that way to have like a shortcut system of sorts to get to the boss right away. So I guess they do like for like Persona 3, 4, 5, they do treat like dungeon crawling difficulties as a separate challenge compared to the boss difficulty.
Yeah. And they work in their own respective ways.
But also there are some games I think like where they do count dungeon difficulty and boss difficulty into one factor, which does get them to put save states to be much more punishing, and that if you lose here, you do like parts of the dungeon all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely changes how you tackle a game too.
Yeah, like Persona 3, for example, like the dungeon crawling in that game, and like dungeon crawling and Battle Field are like basically two different things, and then it's a matter of like muscling your way to the top before you get to the next boss floor. Like two different challenges.
But then Persona 3 is kind of weird in that there's like the dungeon crawling experience, the Tartarus, but there's also like the full moon boss battles. There's like that makes it that you have to traverse Tartarus a bit to level up appropriately in order to challenge the full moon bosses.
And then and then the full moon bosses kind of have their own gimmicks a lot of the time. So that almost now those bosses are not challenging, but I mean they do kind of require their own set of separate strategy than the regular encounters in the Tartarus bosses.
And then there's like fail states in non-combat games that I think is interesting to talk about too. Like we talked about this before, but like visual novels have interesting fail states, I think, because like not only does it tell an interesting story in terms of like how your character fails, also makes it that gives much more sense of a choice system within when you're playing free visual novel, just because like there are various bad endings you can do. So choosing this choice would probably mean that you probably should have read the situation wrong in the story. And like the visual novel, the way how you progress is ultimately reading about the story, learning about the situation, and making the choice that you think your character would make, and then seeing if the choice you make is right or not.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you're using your own, I don't want to say, I guess, educated guesses on what is going to lead to kind of like what outcome based on...
It's sort of that, but like it's testing on if you actually been paying attention to the visual novel, I think, which I think is a fair thing to do when you're playing for a visual novel.
Yeah, because that's a whole different like beast in its entirety with how the fail states work in those kinds of games. Because they're very, a lot of times they tend to be like fairly non-linear, and then there's various bad endings, and then it punishes you in its own way that's unique to that genre.
But I think video game fail states overall is integral to have in game, just because it's ultimately a way to like, in order to have a game, you need to be able to fail in it, I think.
I think that's an essential tool to get players to like really get more invested in the mechanics and try to master it.
Because like ultimately, a fail state is ultimately the way how like they were saying, please be able to do the stuff that we've been teaching you to do.
Like we have all these mechanics, we want you to use them to your best of your ability, not just kind of skim through.
I think
it's a brilliant way to keep players engaged.
Like infuriates players, but it's a good teaching tool too. Like sometimes it can get too far in that sometimes game mechanics can be error and trial sometimes. But like when it's done well, I think it is interesting. Like it is a good teaching tool. Like, let's also like I think we've been missing like one of the biggest games to have interesting fail states, like the Dark Souls games.
Yeah, that's a completely different beast.
Because like Dark Souls has like the way how you get the general fail state is pretty typical, and like the fail state in that game is basically you die, then you reset the instance. But what's interesting is that when you die, you lose all your souls, which is like your main currency to buy stuff, to level up, like and stuff. And that is a pretty hefty penalty. And
yeah, and because then if you die again, then that's gone forever, right?
Yeah, like when you die, you lose our souls, but at the same time, your soul isn't lost forever, because if you go back to the spot where you were, you can get your souls back. This in turn gets you to really encourage you to actually learn from your mistake and learn how not to do it again. At least, and not to rush through the encounter. Because like if you rush through again and just die, then you lose your souls forever.
Yeah, and I think that's why we get a lot of kind of like all these different Souls-like games that are inspired by it, because they see how interesting of a mechanic that is.
Like I think this failsafe is the general what most video games want you to do, to learn from your mistakes and to keep trying. But I think Souls like is brilliant in that it actually implements additional mechanics to get you to do that. How it leaves your soul at the same spot that you die, so you're encouraged to think more about how you fail and to pick up ways or improve your mechanical knowledge of the encounter to do better, or at least get to the same point you are and get the souls. And what's interesting is that even though you lose your souls, is not too punishing of a penalty as compared to roguelikes, because when you die in those games, you lose like actual progress. Why in Dark Souls and Bloodborne and so on, losing your currency is frustrating, but you ultimately don't get worse because of it. Like even in Interior, if you just power on through losing days, you are in a worse state compared to before. In Dark Souls, you are in a bit of a worse state, but not too bad considering.
Yeah, like you can get all that back. It might be difficult, but it's not like you said, like in a roguelike game. It's not like you're actually not losing progress. All that stuff, it's just kind of like, okay, now you got to be more careful next time.
Yeah, it's not like Dark Souls is like the most punishing thing ever, but it can feel that way, I think, because the souls that you earn from defeating enemies along the way, like it can be debilitating to lose all that, since it is the only currency that's worth something in the game, since it's the main way you level up, you progress through the game. But yeah, like I said, failsafes are interesting to talk about just because like they dictate so much of how you play the game, how you learn from the game, and so on. It's like it's equally important as just the mechanics themselves, I think.
Yeah, and it kind of they kind of go hand in hand. It could enrich the mechanics, and then it creates for a more interesting experience, and it keeps players more engaged.
Which does
There's
get
more
me,
to consider.
Which does keep me when people decide like, just makes the failed states have no consequences, man.
It just turned right around on you, like, yeah, see.
So we talk about failed states. Let's talk about difficulty now. Now we did this before, but audio got pretty janky, so here we are again. So difficulty. What do you think is the ideal difficulty, Sword?
I mean, see, I've always been a fan of games having multiple difficulties, because I feel like everyone's I guess quote unquote normal mode is different from each other. Like someone's normal mode might be their easy mode and vice versa. So I think that, or if a game is maybe too easy, like the thing is, if a game is too easy and there's no difficulty setting, then you're stuck with that easy difficulty. You can't just up it, or vice versa. So I don't know. I've always been a fan of having multiple options to, and it also kind of adds replayability too, I think.
Like, I think it depends. Like, I think there is something to be had in a game just having a singular difficulty, because like it allows the game challenge to be uniquely molded for that difficulty and for that play experience, and which can make a game feel a lot of fun to play through when you only have one difficulty to balance around.
Yeah, I feel like they both kind of have their own advantages. In that way, I wouldn't say one is inherently superior, because yeah, when you have just a set difficulty, then the mechanics revolve around that one difficulty.
Yeah, and that, like, it can create some really intense, really fun experiences. Like, I think Sekiro is like one such example where you have to learn how to deal with what the game throws at you, and being able to keep up a good offense, being able to deflect in time, being able to know the instance that when to material counter, when to jump, and when to just dodge in general, and spatial awareness, and you don't want to drop off into a cliff and lose a bunch of health. Like it's all it's teaching you to do all these things together in a boss fight, and like once you get the flow going, it feels like it's very mesmerizing and engaging. And when you feed it, it feels like the most satisfying thing ever. And it feels that way just because there is a set difficulty that you do have to overcome.
Yeah, so yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I was gonna add something, but I was like, took everything in my mouth.
And I think like a game's mechanics does rely on difficulty to be interesting. Because if you just like choose the easy mode, or just like whatever, and just mash A to whatever your way out of an encounter, it doesn't really feel engaging, I think.
Yeah, like I said, I honestly, yeah, in a way I think they both work well, but I do think a set difficulty does have its advantage.
Now, do multiple difficulties have its place? Yeah. Like sometimes people just don't have I guess the time to do it. I guess.
Yeah.
Because
then there's also the issue of like, all right, here's an example. Like, in Nier Automata, I think that the normal mode and the hard mode are just way too drastically different from each other. Like, I think the normal mode is way too easy, and then the hard mode is way too punishing. Like, you can maybe take 2 hits before you're spamming healing items, and but then flip it around, then the easy mode, you're just wiping the floor with every single enemy you encounter. So I think that there needs in a game like that, there should be a better balance.
Like in Nier Automata, it has a much better dodge system, I think, which gets you to master his dodging system more. So like. In that way it has its advantage too. Yeah. Like for me, I always choose like the game's like second or hardest difficulty to play through, because like I want to be able to learn the mechanics of the game properly and be a fair test on it, because like one of the joys of video gaming to me is like learning the game's mechanics and mastering them and being able to overcome it.
Yeah, because then you've mastered the game as it was intended to be played.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd say one is inherently superior to the other. I think that they both have their place.
Like what I will say, like even if a game doesn't have a set difficulty, I'm not gonna complain about it. Like, okay, I just choose the difficulty that I think that suits me the most. But then like at the same time, like if the game does have a set difficulty, I'm not gonna bitch about it being too hard. Like it might be like the design itself might be questionable, but I'm not going to say, oh, the game should have a lower difficulty for something.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is too hard for me, and therefore the game You know,
Like I don't think it should go into the game just expecting an easier difficulty if it doesn't have that. Is it like the game is designed around that difficulty usually? Difficulty is tricky, I think, just because like there's like so many varied ways people learn stuff at different times. And, like,
yeah, that's where it gets tricky with like a set difficulty. Is a game might be a game that one thinks is too easy might be too hard for the other, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it gets. There's like too many variables.
And that's why multiple difficulty is so appealing, I think. Just because like you can get like a difficulty that's more right for you. You think it's a fair difficulty.
Yeah, like if you're like really stuck on a boss, and then you could just turn the difficulty down a couple notches.
I avoid that most of the like.
Yeah, I 99% of the time I avoid doing that if I can, unless I'm just like maybe so fed up for I can't if I can't think of an example right now, but there's exceptions. But for the most part, yeah, I stick with what I got.
But yeah, but like I think difficulty, like just like Videogame say, like difficulty in a fight is like a tool for the game developers to like test you to see if you really do know what you're doing, if you've really been paying attention to the game mechanics. And like when it's done right, it can feel like the more like a good difficult fight can feel like the most invigorating thing to do in a video game, I think.
Yeah, it's so satisfying because you didn't, turn it down to the easiest difficulty and then plow right through it because, the boss was too hard. You actually took the time to master the mechanics and you've accomplished what the game developers intended for you to do in the first place. So I think when you look at it that way, I think that creates for a more fulfilling experience.
I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna ask you something controversial. Do you think there is such a thing as too easy of a difficulty?
Yeah, I think there's such a thing as too easy, and I also think there's such a thing as too hard. I think like they're two sides of the same coin. Like if it's too hard, then it goes into cheapness territory, which I hate. But then if it's so easy to the point where like you have all these mechanics and you can't take advantage of them because you don't have to, and you could just mash your way through, whether it's like maybe you're button mashing or you're just maybe it's a turn-based RPG, it's not that difficult, etc. Then the only time you'll end up doing anything outside the the basic mechanics, because it's so easy, is just to not be bored, which that shouldn't be the reason you delve into the other mechanics. You should do it because you have to.
Like I think there is such a thing as being too easy and too hard. Like too hard is pretty self-explanatory. Like if the game's too hard, then it's basically impossible to beat. And if it's too easy, I think it is fair for games to test you on how well you know the mechanics. Yeah,
but
like the game, like the game builds upon you learning stuff and then testing you on what you learned. I think that, and in order to progress, you should be able to apply what you learned through its ultimate test, which is through a challenging fight.
And then if you fight a boss that's way too easy, then that defeats the whole purpose. The difficulty should be leading up. How to explain it? Like the boss should be a culmination of everything you've learned up to that point. Is basically what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Like
even in visual novel, like you are still reading about the story and learning about how it works, and you are still being tested on if you are making the right choice based on the context of the story, I think.
Yeah.
So
in a way that in its own way that kind of falls into that category.
Yeah. And the difficulty of visual novel isn't like mechanical difficulty like in like action game. It's more like comprehension difficulty. It's like you reading about the situation and you deciding which is the right thing to do, you think, at the time.
Yeah, like how do I avoid getting the bad ending and having to,
Or sometimes where they even get the bad endings to quote like how like I got this bad ending before. What do I do now to change from getting that bad ending now?
Right.
Yeah. Like difficulty in video game fails is like are really important tools to get right in a video game, I think. And I think like a good decent amount of games like do those concepts pretty decently, in that they do get you to learn the mechanics well, and difficulty is a way to test those challenges.
Hmm. Yeah, like they go hand in hand, and when they work well and they're executed well, it creates just so much more fulfilling gaming experience.
But there are games that I think the fail state is pretty wonky, and like it doesn't do what you want a video game fail state to do. Like, for example, Fable 3.
Oh my god!
You cannot die in that game.
No, it's impossible. You at best, or like the worst that'll happen.
Like the worst part isn't that you can't die, because there are various video games where you can't die, but they tailor their challenge, their instances in a way that if you die, you're going to have to reset that instance. Not so much.
Literally just get right back up.
Yeah, not so much in Fable 3 where you just lose a few experience, but you get back right up.
And that's experience you can get back very easily, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
It takes no effort whatsoever.
Yeah. Like the thing is, you just get back up right where you died. Like,
even in a boss battle, like you can't lose.
Yeah.
There's no penalty whatsoever, at least, or barely any penalty that really doesn't hurt you that much.
Like I think a video game fail state, like the penalty should reflect, appropriately. Like the video game fail state is ultimately the game saying you failed, you didn't learn what you need. Now go back, reassess what you need to do, and try again.
Yeah, it doesn't just like you don't have your whole party get wiped out and then have them just stand right back up and then just continue where you left off, and you're fully healed and the boss is still has its health whittled down.
Yeah.
Now I think here's another, I guess maybe not controversial question, but something I thought of just now is between I know there are two evils that are both not ideal, but for me personally, if I had to choose, I would actually rather play through a game that's too easy than too hard or cheap, because if it's cheap, then like I can't beat it. Then I get frustrated and I just walk away. But if a game is too easy, as much as that sucks and it makes for like a boring gaming experience, at least I can get through it. I don't know how you feel.
It depends. Like if a game is way too hard to the point where nobody can beat it, then that's probably worse. But if it's just incredibly hard, but still doable, I think I'd rather do that than the too easy game, because if a game's too easy, I probably would stop playing it because I'm just so bored by the gameplay loop. Because like there's nothing.
I meant like cheapness.
If there's nothing that challenges you, like even cheapness, like if there's a way to counteract that cheapness, even if something you can only do it like in hindsight, then I still take that over a game that's too easy. But that's
I mean, at the end of the day, they're both like two extremes and neither one is ideal regardless, So.
But yeah, like I love video games. I think like they're incredibly interesting medium in terms of storytelling and in terms of getting you to learn a set of in-game skills and testing on it and then succeeding at it when you do what you need.
And that's one of the things that
it's
makes
a medium and it's a medium that relies on your interaction. And I think video game challenge, video game fail states, and difficulty is like the main way of how they interlay that interactivity within the medium.
And that's it's like things like that it makes it's such a unique medium, and the fact that we can even have conversations like this shows you just how different it is from a movie or a book or a TV show. It's just so much more interesting than those in many different ways.
And I think like difficulty can also play a role in telling a story too, just because like how hard a boss is can reflect on how difficult that fight is. Like take Demon Souls, you fight King a lot. He's pretty tricky, and then you fight his true form, which is just a joke. But it's supposed to be a joke because he's just a remnant of what he is. And that plays into the Demon Souls character and story building in the background.
Yeah, you integrate the story into the gameplay, and that's what makes it so unique. Or like kind of building off that, in Final Fantasy X, there was a similar thing where the final boss, like the actual final boss, Yu Yevon, is also pathetic. But that's because in the story he's basically a leech, and he's basically like nothing, and that's why you could just wipe the floor with him, and all he does is heal himself and over again because he's got nothing to use for a host. So I thought that was also really interesting. So it's kind of similar. And
yeah, like video gaming can do provide like a lot of interesting stuff through difficulty, I think. And the way how you can fail stuff is interesting too. Like like I said, it can dictate how you play the game, as well as get you to learn about various mechanics that you probably didn't had a fine grasp for, and at least not until you failed it, and then relearn how to do it again. Is there anything more to talk about regarding this topic, you think?
Nothing comes to mind on my end.
Yeah, that's our thoughts on basically video game difficulty and fail states. Overall, I think they're incredibly important to get right. And like,
but then when they are done right, then it's you know,
when they're done decently and right, they can enhance the experience. But if they're done wrong, you get like a situation Fable 3 where the game is just you just feel like you're just going through the motions of beating the game, which I don't think you'll want that in the video game. I think you do want to be engaged in the game. Like even like just reading, like experiencing the story, like you still need to understand the context of the story and be invested in it to get through it. So if you're just going through the motions, then it's just it's probably the worst experience to experience in any type of entertainment, I think. Just going through the motions.
Yeah, where you're not like invested and you're just like kind of slocking through it. Yeah, no, that's like one of the worst kind of experiences for it.
But yeah, well, I think that's all for today's episode. That's all for today's episode of Sirus Gaming Corner. This is Peter Cyrus signing off.
Take care, everyone.